It started on a night when the wind wouldn't stop whispering through the cracks of my old house. I remember sitting by the window, the one that faces the orchard, with my shawl wrapped tight around my shoulders. The clock had just struck 11, and every sound felt louder than it should have been, the ticking, the rustling leaves, even my own heartbeat. I had no idea that before dawn I'd discover something that would change everything I believed about my family, about my daughter, my granddaughter, and myself. You see, it had been almost 20 years since my daughter Evelyn disappeared. People in the town had stopped asking questions long ago. Some said she ran away with a lover. Others whispered that she drowned herself in the river after that terrible fight with her husband. But I never believed any of it. A mother knows when her child is gone, and when she's simply missing. I always felt Evelyn was out there somewhere. Lost, yes, but alive in some way I couldn't explain. And then came Lila, my granddaughter. She was only 6 when Evelyn vanished. I raised her myself in this same creaky house, feeding her soup when she cried for her mother and braiding her hair before school the way Evelyn used to. She grew up quiet, too quiet, always writing in those little notebooks of hers. "It helps me remember things," she'd say. I thought it was harmless, a girl's habit. But that diary, that ordinary-looking blue book I found under her mattress last month, it revealed everything. That night, Lila was away on a university trip. I went into her room to water the plants, the ones she insists are emotional creatures. The lamp on her desk flickered weakly, and when I bent to unplug it, my hand brushed against something wedged between the bed slats. A notebook, frayed edges, faded cover, her initials carved faintly into the corner. I should have left it there. I know I should have. But some instincts are louder than guilt. I sat on her bed and began to read. The first pages were innocent enough poems, scattered thoughts, sketches of faces she'd seen in dreams. But then the tone shifted. The handwriting grew messy, desperate. The ink pressed so hard it bled through the paper. She wrote about nightmares, about the sound in the hallway, the woman in the mirror who looks like me but older, the locked room that smells like rain and iron. And then the name appeared, Evelyn. I remember clutching the diary so hard my knuckles whitened. Lila had written, "I saw her again last night. Grandma says she's gone, but I know she isn't. She came to my window, and she whispered my name." My heart pounded so fiercely I thought I'd faint. Was it grief resurfacing? Madness? Or had Lila truly seen her mother? The entries continued, days, months of them. She wrote about following footsteps in the attic, hearing humming in the dead of night, the same lullaby Evelyn used to sing. She said she'd found something in the locked cellar, something wrapped in a red scarf. But the pages after that were torn out. I sat there trembling, feeling like the walls were breathing around me. The next morning, I confronted Lila when she came home. Her face went pale when I mentioned the diary. "You weren't supposed to read that," she said, voice trembling. "It was just writing, Grandma, just stories." But her eyes betrayed her wide, fearful, darting toward the window. That's when I noticed the same red scarf tied around her wrist. That scarf, I remembered it vividly. It had belonged to Evelyn. The police found it years ago by the riverbank, stained and torn. They said it proved she was gone. But here it was again, bright as ever, looped gently around Lila's hand. My stomach turned cold. "Where did you get that?" I whispered. She hesitated, then said, "It was always here. You just never looked in the right place." That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the windows, and I could swear I heard footsteps above me. The attic door had been shut for years. I had nailed it myself after Evelyn vanished, to stop the leaks, or at least, that's what I told myself. But when I climbed the stairs with a candle, the nails were gone. The door hung slightly open. The smell hit me first. Dust, wood rot, and something else. Metallic, like rust or old blood. I stepped inside. The moonlight slipped through the cracks in the roof, casting lines across forgotten trunks and broken furniture. And there, in the corner, was a small chest I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs, faded Polaroids of Evelyn and Lila smiling in the garden. But in one, something felt wrong. There was a man in the background, tall, wearing a dark coat. His face was half-turned, blurry. I'd never seen him before. And behind him, barely visible, was the edge of that same red scarf. I took the photos downstairs, laid them out under the lamp, and stared until my eyes burned. That's when I noticed the faint writing on the back of one, "Don't trust what you buried." My heart froze, because there was something buried, something I hadn't thought about in years. The old garden shed behind the house. Evelyn had locked herself in there the week before she vanished. I'd found her digging holes in the dirt, muttering about hiding the truth before they find it. I thought she'd lost her mind. But now I wasn't so sure. The rain began to pour outside, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. I put on my coat, grabbed a lantern, and stepped into the night. The path was slick, the air sharp with the smell of wet earth. When I reached the shed, the padlock was broken. I swallowed hard and pushed the door open. Inside, the air was damp and heavy. The lantern light wavered, revealing old tools, jars of paint, and in the center a patch of disturbed soil. I knelt, my fingers trembling, and began to dig. The earth was soft, like it had been turned recently. My breath caught when something cold and metallic scraped against my hand. It was a small tin box, rusted shut. I pried it open, and inside, beneath a folded note, was Evelyn's wedding ring. I remember screaming not from fear, but from the realization that all these years the truth had been waiting beneath my own garden. I opened the note with shaking hands. The paper was damp, but I could still make out her writing. "If they find me, tell Lila the truth. Tell her it wasn't me who disappeared that night." And that's where the candle flickered out. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of the front door creaking open. For a moment, I thought it was just the wind again, but then I heard soft footsteps moving across the floorboards, light, careful, almost hesitant. I reached for my cane and stepped into the hallway, my heart thudding in rhythm with each creak. "Lila?" I called out. No answer. The air inside the house felt colder than before, though the fire hadn't gone out. I followed the sound into the kitchen, and there she was, standing near the sink, staring out the window, her back stiff and still. She didn't turn around when I entered. "You shouldn't go outside in the rain, Grandma," she said softly. "It's not safe for you." I froze. My hands tightened around the handle of the cane. She couldn't have known I'd gone out the previous night. I hadn't told her about the shed, or the box, or the note. My voice shook when I spoke. "What do you mean, not safe?" She finally turned her head. Her eyes looked glassy, almost distant. "You keep digging things up that should have stayed buried." My mouth went dry. For a second, I thought she was joking, but her tone was flat, heavy, like she wasn't speaking for herself, but echoing someone else's words. I wanted to ask how she knew about the box, but before I could, she walked past me, brushing my arm lightly. Her hand was ice cold. After she went upstairs, I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the window. The garden looked peaceful under the soft drizzle, the shed door barely visible through the fog. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching from there. Later that day, I went back to Lila's room. The diary was still under her pillow, but the last few pages were gone, torn cleanly out. I searched everywhere under the bed, in drawers, even behind the radiator. Nothing. I sat on her floor, shaking, remembering her words. "It was always here. You just never looked in the right place." And then it struck me. The photograph, the one with the man in the background. I went to fetch it from the living room. Under better light, I noticed something I'd missed before. Behind the man's coat, faintly visible, was the shape of a mirror hanging on the wall. Not just any mirror. It was the one that used to hang in Evelyn's room upstairs, the one I'd covered with a white sheet after she vanished. My chest tightened. I climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and dust. I reached Evelyn's door and hesitated. That room had been untouched for nearly 2 decades. I slowly turned the knob. The air that hit me was stale, but it carried something else, too, a faint trace of her perfume. The mirror still stood against the far wall, covered by that same sheet. My reflection flickered in the glass frame beside it, distorted by dust. My hand trembled as I lifted the sheet. The mirror was cracked at the corner. My face appeared warped in its fractured surface. And there, just for a second, I saw something behind me. A shadow, faint, standing near the doorway. I turned sharply. No one was there. But on the vanity table I found something strange. Another notebook, smaller, older. I opened it. The first line read, "If anyone finds this, it means I didn't make it through the night." It was Evelyn's handwriting. I sank into the chair, my pulse racing. She wrote about being followed, about voices in the house. She said she'd discovered something about her husband, a secret he'd sworn to keep hidden. "He isn't who he says he is," she wrote. "If he ever finds out that I know, he'll make me disappear like the others." The others. My fingers trembled over those 2 words. Who were they? And then the last page, barely legible, smudged by tears or water. "If he comes again, I'll leave proof. I'll hide it where she'll find it when she's old enough." I looked around the room, scanning every corner. Then I saw at the floorboard near the dresser, slightly raised. I knelt, pried it open. and inside was a small locket, tarnished and cold. Inside the locket was a photograph of Lila as a baby, and the same man from the earlier photo, holding her. I gasped so loudly I startled myself. Evelyn's husband had been away that day, the day the photo was supposedly taken, so who was this man? That night, I couldn't rest. The storm outside raged louder than before. Thunder cracked above the roof, shaking the windows. I sat in my rocking chair, holding the locket and staring into the fire. And that's when I heard it again, the humming. Soft, slow, like a lullaby drifting down the stairs. Evelyn's lullaby. I followed the sound. It led me to the basement door, the same door Evelyn used to stand beside late at night, whispering things I never understood. I gripped the handle and pushed it open. The air was damp, filled with the scent of old earth. The steps creaked as I descended. The humming grew louder. I could feel it vibrating in my chest. Then the lantern flickered, and for an instant, the shadows on the wall moved as if something or someone was swaying in the dark. I raised the light, and there, against the far wall, written in faded red chalk, were words that froze my blood. She knows. Stop her before she tells. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. My foot hit something hard. It was a trunk, old, wooden, the same one that used to be in Evelyn's room before she disappeared. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were clothes, photographs, and bones. Small bones wrapped in cloth. My stomach twisted, and I screamed, stumbling away. The cloth had a name embroidered at the edge, Evelyn. The lantern fell and shattered. The basement plunged into darkness. I groped for the stairs, my breath coming in shallow gasps. When I finally reached the top and slammed the door shut, I collapsed on the floor, sobbing, shaking uncontrollably. But through the crack at the bottom of the door, I could still see a faint red glow pulsing from below, like the basement itself was breathing. I stayed there for hours, unable to move, until the first light of dawn touched the walls. When I finally dared to open the door again, the glow was gone. The trunk, too, had vanished. Only the chalk words remained, faint and fading. When Lila came downstairs later that morning, she looked pale, almost ghostly. "You went down there, didn't you?" she whispered. "How did you know?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "Because I dreamed it. Every time I dream about that place, something changes in real life." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Grandma, I don't think Mom disappeared. I think she's still here, in this house." And as she said it, a cold gust swept through the hallway, and the mirror upstairs cracked again this time, all on its own. For days after that morning, the house refused to be silent. Every night, something stirred footsteps pacing above my room, whispers threading through the walls, faint humming that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. I tried convincing myself it was the wind, or the old wood settling, but deep down I knew better. There was something inside these walls, something that had been waiting all these years to be heard. Lila became more distant after our conversation. She moved through the house like a ghost herself, barely eating, barely speaking. She spent most of her time near Evelyn's old room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her eyes closed, whispering things I couldn't make out. I'd find her there at dawn, murmuring to the cracked mirror, her breath fogging its surface. Once, I called her name softly, and she turned to me with tears glistening on her cheeks. "She talks to me, Grandma," she said in a trembling voice. "She tells me things that don't belong to my memories but feel like mine." I wanted to believe she was grieving or dreaming. But grief doesn't open locked doors, and dreams don't leave muddy footprints on the attic stairs. One evening, I gathered every scrap of courage left in my old bones and decided to confront whatever truth was hiding. I took the diaries, both Evelyn's and Lila's, and spread them across the kitchen table. Line after line, I searched for a pattern, a clue. Somewhere between their words, I felt two timelines twisting together, mother and daughter speaking across the years. Evelyn's last entry mentioned the truth buried beneath the roots of what he planted. Lila's final written words before the pages were torn out read, "I think I found where he hid her. The roots are too deep." The orchard, of course. The apple orchard behind the house was Evelyn's pride. She planted every tree herself the summer before she vanished. She used to say, "One day, these roots will outlive all our secrets." At the time, I'd laughed. Now the words echoed like a curse. That night, I armed myself with nothing but a lantern, a small shovel, and trembling determination. The moon was bright enough to cast the orchard in silver light. The trees swayed as if whispering to one another. I stopped beneath the largest one, the one Evelyn had named Hope. The ground was damp, soft. I began to dig, each scoop heavier than the last. The scent of wet earth and decay filled my lungs. Just as my arms began to ache, the shovel hit something hard. My breath hitched. I knelt and brushed the soil away with my hands. It was a wooden box, small, nailed shut. The same kind of box my late husband used to keep his tools in. I hesitated for a long moment before prying it open. Inside was a folded photograph, yellowed with age. My husband, Arthur, stood beside a woman whose face was half hidden by shadows. She wore Evelyn's scarf, but it wasn't Evelyn. It was someone who looked eerily like her, same eyes, same smile, but older. On the back of the photo, in Arthur's handwriting, were the words, "Project Reclaim Subject E, Success." My stomach lurched. My husband had been a government researcher before he retired, a quiet man who worked on memory studies, as he called them. I never understood what that meant, and he never explained. I'd thought he was just another man who buried himself in books and experiments. But now, looking at that photo, I realized he had buried something else entirely. Lightning flashed across the orchard, followed by a clap of thunder that shook the ground. I shoved the photograph into my coat pocket and turned to run back to the house, but standing between the trees, barely visible in the flickering light, was a figure, a woman. Her dress clung to her as though soaked through. Her hair, long and dark, plastered to her pale face. I froze, the lantern shaking in my hand. "Evelyn?" I whispered. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, her eyes glinting faintly. Then, in a voice soft and strained, she said, You shouldn't have dug it up. My knees nearly gave way. Evelyn, is it really you? She tilted her head, and for a moment her features blurred, her face shifting like a reflection on disturbed water. You weren't supposed to find her, she murmured. He told me you'd forget. And just like that, she was gone. One blink, and she vanished into the mist. I stumbled back to the house, heart hammering. My hands shook so violently that I dropped the lantern at the doorway. Inside, Lila stood by the stairs, pale as snow. You saw her too, didn't you? She asked quietly. I couldn't speak. She took a step closer. Grandma, Mom wasn't who you think she was, and neither am I. Her words hit me harder than the thunder outside. I reached for her, but she stepped back, shaking her head. I found the rest of the diary pages, she said, voice trembling. Mom wrote that Grandpa made copies people who looked the same, acted the same, but they weren't real. He said he could fix broken memories by recreating them. No, I whispered. That's impossible. She handed me a torn page, the ink smeared and uneven. He said I was his second attempt, it read. If she disappears, there will be another. There always will. My knees buckled. I sank into the nearest chair, gasping for air. What are you saying, Lila? She didn't answer right away. She simply lifted her hand and touched her face, her eyes filling with tears. Sometimes I don't recognize myself in the mirror, she whispered. Sometimes I hear her voice in my head telling me things I shouldn't know. Grandma, what if I'm not me? The words tore through me. I wanted to scream, to deny it, but deep down, I felt the cracks of truth spreading like ice. The humming, the strange memories, the reflection in the mirror, it all fit now. Arthur had been experimenting in his final years. He talked about restoring the lost, about continuing the lineage of memory. I dismissed it as scientific nonsense. But maybe he'd succeeded. The house groaned suddenly, like something alive shifting its weight. A gust of wind slammed the window open, scattering the diary pages across the floor. One page landed against the fireplace, curling at the edges from the heat. The ink shimmered faintly in the light, revealing new words beneath the old ones. If you're reading this, it means she's waking up. I stared at Lila, whose face had gone blank, her pupils dilating like black pools. Grandma, she said in a voice that wasn't hers. He said it's time to finish what he started. The fire flared brighter, and in that burning light, I saw it the shadow of a man standing just behind her, faint but unmistakable. Arthur? I screamed her name, but the lights flickered and went out. When the lights went out that night, the darkness felt heavier than anything I'd ever known. I could still smell the smoke from the fire, hear the storm clawing at the windows, but above it all was the faintest whisper Arthur's voice. It was so close I could almost feel his breath on my neck. You should have left it buried, Margaret, he said, just like he used to when he caught me prying into his study all those years ago. My hands fumbled for the matches on the mantel. The flame flared to life, trembling like my pulse. The shadow behind Lila was gone, but she stood frozen, her head tilted slightly to one side. "Grandma," she said softly, "he's calling me." My throat went dry. "No, sweetheart, don't listen. He's gone. He's been gone for 20 years. She shook her head slowly. "He's not gone. He's waiting Where it started. My blood ran cold. Where it started. The basement. I followed her as she drifted toward the cellar door, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The match in my hand burned low, scorching my fingers, but I didn't dare blow it out. She stopped at the door, her fingers grazing the handle. "He said you'd try to stop me," she whispered. "He said you'd be scared of the truth." Her voice wasn't quite hers anymore. It had an echo to it, a faint distortion like two tones overlapping Lila's innocence, laced with something older, colder. "Lila, look at me," I pleaded. "You're my granddaughter. Whatever he did, whatever he told you, it ends tonight." She turned slowly, her eyes glinting in the dying flame. "Then come and see what you helped create." The words hit me like a slap. Before I could speak, she pulled open the basement door. The air that rushed out was freezing, damp, and thick with that same metallic scent I'd smelled before. The match went out. I lit another and followed her down the stairs, one step at a time, my heart pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. The lantern was still where I'd dropped it the night before, miraculously unbroken. I lit it and raised it high. The basement had changed. Where the trunk had been, there was now a large metal door embedded into the far wall, one I'd never seen before. It looked almost surgical, its frame lined with rusted bolts. A symbol was etched into the metal, a circle split by a vertical line. I'd seen it once before on Arthur's old research folders. Lila placed her hand on the door. There was a faint hum, and it slid open on its own. The lantern light spilled into a hidden room beyond, one lined with glass panels and old machinery, tables covered with vials and yellowed notes, shelves of tapes labeled in Arthur's neat handwriting, Subject A, Subject B, Subject C, and then Subject E, Evelyn. I stepped forward, trembling. The air smelled like chemicals and rot. On one of the tables lay what looked like a body beneath a sheet. I couldn't breathe. I moved closer and pulled the fabric back. It wasn't a body, it was a mannequin, half metal, half flesh. Its face was eerily familiar. Evelyn's eyes, Evelyn's mouth, but not her soul. The skin was waxy, the features too perfect. The neck was covered in stitched seams. I staggered backward, nearly dropping the lantern. "Do you understand now?" Lila's voice came from behind me. "He didn't lose her. He rebuilt her. But something went wrong. She remembered too much." The lantern flickered, and for a brief instant I saw movement in the reflection of the glass panels. Something shifted behind the machines, a flash of white, a hand pressing against the glass from the inside. I froze. "Lila," I whispered, "what's in there?" She didn't answer. She walked to a small control panel at the side of the room, her fingers brushing the switches like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "She's been waiting for us," she said. With a sudden click, the lights in the hidden room flickered on. My eyes widened. There, floating in a vertical glass chamber filled with some murky fluid, was a woman. Her hair drifted like ink in water. Her eyes were closed, but her face, oh God, her face was Evelyn's. I let out a sound that was neither scream nor sob. My knees gave way, and I fell against the table. The mannequin clattered to the floor. "She's alive," I gasped. "Arthur kept her alive." Lila looked at the chamber, her expression unreadable. Not alive, she whispered. Preserved, waiting. I could hardly hear over the ringing in my ears. For what? For me. And before I could stop her, she reached toward the control panel and flipped the main switch. The room roared to life, the machines whirred, the chamber hissed, bubbles surged to the surface. I screamed her name, but she didn't move. The glass cracked. Once, twice. Then it shattered, spilling a rush of thick, cold liquid across the floor. The woman inside collapsed to her knees, coughing up water, her hair clinging to her face. She lifted her head slowly, and those eyes, those hollow, lifeless eyes, stared straight at me. "Mother," Lila whispered. The figure looked at her, blinked once, and smiled weakly. "Lila?" Her voice was faint, fragile, yet unmistakably Evelyn's. I stumbled backward, clutching my chest. No, no, this can't be real. Evelyn, or whatever she was, stood, her movements jerky, uncertain, like a puppet learning to walk again. She reached for Lila. "You're grown," she murmured. "You're perfect. He finished you." Lila's face crumpled. "Finished me?" Evelyn's eyes flicked toward me. She never knew. She wasn't supposed to. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "What are you talking about? What did Arthur do to you?" Evelyn smiled sadly. "He didn't kill me, Mother. He remade me. But he couldn't get it right. My memories wouldn't stay inside. They leaked. So he made her maid Lila to hold what I couldn't." Lila staggered back. "No, I'm real. I'm me." "You're what's left of me," Evelyn whispered. "You're the part that survived." The machines began to spark, the lights flickering wildly. Water seeped into the circuits, and smoke filled the room. I grabbed Lila's arm. "We have to get out!" But she stood frozen, staring at Evelyn as if seeing herself reflected. Evelyn reached out a trembling hand. "Come home, my child," she said. "Don't touch her," I screamed, but the air cracked with another explosion. The glass behind them burst, and the lights went out. I remember grabbing for Lila in the dark, pulling her up the stairs, choking on the smoke. Behind us I heard Evelyn's voice, broken, distant. "You can't save her. She already remembers." When we reached the top, the door slammed shut behind us with a force that rattled the entire house. The floorboards shook, and somewhere deep below, the machines kept humming long after the power should have died. Lila turned to me, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Grandma," she whispered, "I think she's still inside me." And that was the first time I saw it, Evelyn's reflection moving behind Lila's eyes. After that night, nothing about the house or Lila was the same again. The storm passed, but the silence it left behind was unnatural. The birds that usually nested under the eaves were gone. Even the wind seemed afraid to breathe near the windows. The air inside felt thick, charged, as though the walls remembered what had happened in the basement. Lila barely spoke for days. She'd sit by the cold fireplace, her eyes fixed on nothing, her fingers tracing invisible shapes on her arm. Sometimes she'd whisper names Evelyn, Arthur, Margaret, as if testing which one belonged to her. Once I found her standing in front of the cracked mirror upstairs, her palm pressed to the glass, murmuring, "She's close now. I can feel her moving. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run so far from that cursed place that I'd forget its every shadow. But how could I abandon her? She was my granddaughter, or at least she had been. I tried to burn the diaries, both of them. I thought if I destroyed the words, maybe the memories would loosen their grip. But as soon as the first page caught flame, Lila screamed from the next room, a blood-curdling, raw sound that froze me in place. I ran to her, and when I got there she was clutching her head, sobbing. "It hurts," she cried. "She doesn't want to be forgotten." I dropped the burning pages into the sink and doused them with water. The flames hissed out, leaving only smoke and ash. Lila's sobbing quieted, and when she finally looked up, her eyes were wrong. They were Evelyn's eyes. "Mom?" I whispered, though the word felt like poison in my mouth. She tilted her head slowly, and that faint, familiar smile, Evelyn's soft, sorrowful smile, spread across her face. "You always loved your garden more than me," she said quietly, using Evelyn's voice. "You told me flowers never lie, but they do, Mother. They bloom over graves." My whole body went cold. "Lila, please, come back to me." She blinked once, twice, then her expression shifted. The tension drained from her face. "Grandma?" she whispered, voice small again. "What happened?" I took her hand. "It's all right," I lied. "You just fainted. You need rest." That night I locked her door, not to keep her in, but to keep something else out. I didn't sleep. I sat in the hallway with a candle burning low, watching the shadows crawl along the wallpaper. Every now and then I heard faint thuds, whispers, and the sound of a music box playing somewhere inside the walls. By morning, the candle had melted down to nothing, and the house smelled faintly of lavender, again Evelyn's scent. I found Lila asleep at her desk, the diary open in front of her. But this time the handwriting wasn't hers. It was neat, deliberate Evelyn's. "You can't separate us," it read. "The blood remembers." As I read, the words began to fade right before my eyes, dissolving into the paper like ink drawn back into the pen. I slammed the book shut, trembling. That's when I heard footsteps in the attic. Slow, measured, heavy. No one had been up there since that night I'd found Evelyn's note. I grabbed the lantern and climbed the stairs, every creak echoing in the stillness. When I reached the top, the door was already open. Inside, everything was as I'd left it, dusty trunks, broken furniture, the smell of old wood. But the mirror in the corner, the one I'd uncovered, was different. It was clean now, its surface gleaming like new. And in it, I saw something that stopped my heart. It wasn't my reflection. It was Evelyn's, standing behind me, smiling faintly. I turned so fast I nearly fell. No one was there. But when I faced the mirror again, her reflection hadn't moved. She was still looking at me, her lips beginning to part. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. Her voice drifted out, faint as breath. "You hid the truth, Mother. You told them I ran away. You said it was my weakness. But it was you. You let him do it." I shook my head violently. "That's not true. I didn't know what he was doing. I thought you were gone." The reflection tilted her head. "You always chose silence when truth became inconvenient." The lantern flickered, throwing her face into fragments of light. For a moment, she looked less human, more like something made of memory and grief. I stumbled backward, knocking over a box. Old photographs spilled across the floor. I bent to pick them up, but they weren't the ones I remembered. In each of them, Evelyn was missing. Just gone, blurred out, or replaced with someone else. The house shuddered suddenly, the floorboards groaning as dust fell from the ceiling. I heard Lila scream downstairs. I ran. She was standing in the living room, trembling, staring at the wall where our family portraits hung. But all the pictures had changed, every single one. Where Evelyn's face had once been, there was now only Lila's. "She's taking me," Lila whispered. "She wants to live again." I rushed to her, grabbing her shoulders. "No, listen to me. You're stronger than her. She's just a memory, do you understand? A broken echo. She can't have you." Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed in my arms. I laid her on the couch, trying to wake her, but she was cold to the touch. Her breathing slowed, her lips parting slightly, as if to speak, and then her voice changed again. "You can't save her," Evelyn whispered through her. "She's mine. She was always mine." The lamps flickered violently. The air grew so cold I could see my breath. The house itself seemed to breathe with us, its walls expanding, contracting, groaning like lungs straining for air. "Then take me instead," I cried out. "Leave her! Take me!" The silence that followed was unbearable. Then a soft laugh echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "You already gave me your life, Mother. Every lie you told fed me. Every time you looked away, I grew stronger. I felt the floor vibrate beneath my feet. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Glass shattered from the frames, and the chandelier swung wildly above us. I held Lila close as dust rained down, and then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The lights went out completely. I sat there in the dark, listening to Lila's faint breathing. Slowly, her hand moved. She touched my face gently. "Grandma," she whispered weakly. "I saw her. She's not done yet." Her eyes fluttered open, and for a split second, two reflections overlapped in them, hers and Evelyn's. The clock struck midnight, and somewhere deep beneath the floorboards, I heard the soft hum of the machines coming back to life. By the next evening, the house no longer felt like mine. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if they'd developed a heartbeat of their own. The air buzzed with a low vibration, like a distant machine coming alive again after years of sleep. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but then I saw the faint glow leaking up through the cracks in the floorboards. The basement. Lila hadn't spoken all day. She sat in her room, pale, still, staring at her reflection as though she were waiting for it to blink first. I'd locked the door again, but she hadn't tried to leave. She just kept whispering, "She's almost here." When the sun disappeared behind the trees, the power went out for the final time. The lamps died, the clock stopped ticking, and the silence that followed felt like the world itself was holding its breath. I knew what I had to do. If this was the night it ended, then I would end it myself. I lit the lantern once more, the same one that had followed me through every secret this house had tried to keep. The flame flickered weakly, but it was enough. I walked to Lila's door and unlocked it. She turned her head slowly when I entered. Her eyes looked darker now, shadowed by something ancient. "She's awake?" she murmured. "Then let her hear me," I said, forcing the words through a trembling throat. Her gaze followed me as I crossed the room, knelt by her side, and took her hand. It was cold. "Lila," I whispered, "if you can hear me, you have to fight her. She's not your mother anymore. She's just what he made of her an echo. Don't let her take you." Lila's lips parted, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. "You think love is enough to erase me?" It was Evelyn, soft, trembling, furious. "You let him turn me into a thing. You let him steal my name, my face, my life. You let him lock me away like a secret." Tears filled my eyes. "I didn't know, Evelyn. I swear I didn't know what he was doing." "You always knew," the voice hissed. "You heard me crying that night. You heard me screaming in the cellar when the machine started, but you shut your door. You shut your heart." I fell to my knees, gripping her hand tighter. "Please, forgive me. Take me, if you must but leave her. She's just a child." Evelyn, through Lila, smiled faintly, the same haunting smile I'd seen in the mirror. "She's not a child. She's me. The perfect memory." The only thing that worked. The floor vibrated again, stronger this time. The hum below turned into a throbbing rhythm, and the air filled with a faint blue light. I could hear the machines turning, the electricity crackling back to life. Lila's eyes rolled back as she gasped, her body arching against the bed. "It hurts," she cried, her voice shifting between hers and Evelyn's. "She's pulling me down. I didn't think. I just ran." Down the hall, down the stairs, through the creaking kitchen, and toward the cellar. The glow seeped through the cracks like veins of fire. I yanked the door open and descended. The metal door in the basement was wide open again, and inside the hidden room, every machine was alive, spinning, pulsing, sparking. The air stank of ozone and burnt oil, and in the middle of it all stood Evelyn. She was whole now, her hair dry, her movements smooth, her face almost human again. But her eyes were voids. "You can't stop it, Mother," she said calmly. "She's almost complete. The bloodline will continue." I lifted the lantern high. "You're not my daughter, you're his experiment. You're what's left of his madness." She tilted her head. "And what are you, then? The witness who stayed quiet? The accomplice who turned away?" Her words cut through me like knives. "You deserved life," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. "But not like this. Not at the cost of her soul." Evelyn's expression softened for a moment. Something human flickered in her face. "You could have saved me." "I'm saving you now," I said. And before I could lose my nerve, I hurled the lantern against the nearest machine. The glass shattered. Flames burst instantly, licking up the wires and papers. Evelyn screamed, not in pain, but fury, and lunged forward. I stumbled backward, tripping over cables, grabbing the edge of the table to steady myself. Sparks rained around us. She reached for me, her fingers cold as steel, but I shoved her back into the spreading fire. Her dress caught first, then her hair. The scent of burning oil filled the air. She screamed again, the sound inhuman, then the machines exploded in a shower of light. I fell, the impact knocking the breath out of me. The world roared with fire and thunder. The walls cracked. Smoke poured through the ceiling, and somewhere above, I heard Lila's voice crying my name. I crawled to the stairs, dragging myself up one step at a time, my lungs burning, my vision blurring. The house trembled around me, the foundation groaning as though the earth itself wanted to swallow it whole. When I reached the top, I saw Lila standing at the foot of the staircase, her eyes wide with terror. "Grandma!" she screamed. I pulled her close, coughing, choking on the smoke. "It's over," I whispered. "She's gone." But when I looked into her eyes, I saw her, Evelyn. Not angry now, not cruel, just tired. She looked at me through Lila's face, her expression calm. "Thank you," she whispered softly, "for letting me go." Then her eyes rolled back, and Lila went limp in my arms. I carried her out through the front door as the first flames broke through the windows. The house burned behind us, our family's memories, its secrets, all of it devoured by the fire. I laid Lila in the grass and held her hand until the firemen came. They said it was an accident, old wiring, faulty circuits. No one questioned the machines buried beneath the foundation. No one asked about the second voice they claimed to hear echoing from the flames. It's been 3 months now. Lila is alive. But sometimes when the light hits her face just right, I see Evelyn's smile flash for a moment before fading away. She doesn't remember much, just flashes of dreams, shadows of voices she can't name. I tell her it's over, that the past is gone. But at night, when I sit by her bed and listen to her breathing, I swear I can still hear faint humming beneath the floorboards like the rhythm of a heart that refuses to die. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see the orchard again, moonlight spilling through the trees, the scent of rain and soil, and a figure standing just beyond the roots of hope. She never speaks, she just watches, waiting for the day the blood remembers again,